I'm just going to wait one more minute for at least a few more attendees to join in. Okay, we'll go ahead and call it there. So welcome everyone to ICE. If you're not familiar with ICE, ICE stands for Interactive Chapter Exchange. And basically, it's an opportunity for chapters from across the country to interact with one another. This is the first part of ICE. So next week, we'll have the second part on Wednesday and Thursday, where you'll be able to meet in small groups with chapters and discuss the issues that you're having and brainstorm solutions, exchange ideas on what has worked for your chapter. And I highly recommend you sign up for those. You can sign up for them through the Whova app. So go to your agenda, find the session on Wednesday or Thursday that works for you. I think there's 6 sessions in total, so hopefully you're able to find one that works for you. And yeah, I highly recommend them. I think they're one of the most important parts of convention, or now unvention, for this year. But to get started with today, we have a panel of some successful chapters who have been able to navigate the pandemic/online season of Tower to Pi. They've actually made videos that go over what has worked for them. So I will link those into the chats. I recommend checking these out on your own time if you haven't already. If you haven't gotten to look over them, that's okay though. That's not prerequisite knowledge for the panel today. Feel free to think of any question that comes to you and you'll be able to ask it shortly. But I'm going to go ahead and have each of our panelists introduce themselves. So how about I'll start with Elizabeth? Thank you. And now I'll move on to Savannah.
Hi, my name is Savannah Armstrong. I'm from AZ Alpha chapter, and I am a senior in mechanical engineering and this year's administrative vice president in our chapter. And we're about 40 members right now in our chapter. And yeah, we have been working a lot on transitioning to online format since the pandemic.
Cool, thank you. Annie, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Annie. I was last year's president of Arizona Alpha, with Savannah. We're at the University of Arizona, and just a little bit more about our chapter is that the main operations of our chapter are general body meetings every other week. We also host social events and volunteer events, and we provide tutoring to underclassmen in the College of Engineering.
Cool. Now, Kim, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. I'm Kimberly Bennett. I'm the president of the California Alpha Beta chapter, which is the University of California, Riverside. I'm a 4th-year bioengineering major. Our org is a little small. I think we're at 21 members in total, but it looks like it's going to be changing this year. And so tune in to find out more.
Awesome. And then I think we had some technical issues with Elizabeth. Can you try talking?
Can you guys hear me now? I've been having some problems. Okay, awesome. I'm Elizabeth. I am a junior mechanical engineering major at Maryland Beta and the current president of the chapter. We have about 50 active members, and most of our events consist of our general body meetings, our social meetings, but then also a big part of it is our community service events.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for the introduction. So obviously you can see we have a variety of chapters present. So if you in the audience have any personal questions, feel free to keep them in mind right now, and you'll be able to either enter them into the chat, or if you want, you can also use the raise hand feature, and then we'll allow you to turn your audio on, and you'll be able to ask the panelists directly what your question is. But we'll get started with some pre-selected questions. So I'm going to start with the topic of image on campus. And obviously it's a lot harder given COVID, because you can't post posters all over the place. You might not be able to go in person to like a club meeting or like a class and present about Tau Beta Pi, right? So it's obviously a little bit more challenging. I was wondering for each of you, what's something that your chapter has been doing to build image on chapter despite the the lack of things that you could do pre-COVID? And any of you are welcome to start off with that.
I can start off. This year, I know our chapter, we were able to attend our university's club fair, which transitioned to an online kind of Zoom format. It was primarily freshmen, so not necessarily people who were eligible for our chapter, but we did get a lot of questions about how they could become eligible, and just kind of getting our name out there on campus. And then as well, our honors convocation ceremony that the university has each year, they usually select a student speaker from Tau Beta Pi. So I was able to do that and emphasize, getting an invitation to Tau Beta Pi is a great honor and something that students should look forward to and accept. So those are kind of the ways that we've been able to reach out on campus.
One thing that I feel like has been helpful to us is that we have a couple events in the past, and we're trying to do more so in the future, do events with other organizations on campus that are engineering related. For example, I'm also on the board of my university's chapter of ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. And so doing joint events with them, we've been able to, obviously help introduce more people to the organization, as well as, for example, the Society of Women Engineers, which is very active on our campus.
Yeah, and I guess to kind of like go off of that point, one thing that has been really helpful for our chapter, especially because we're so small and kind of unknown, is boosting our social media presence. So we started our Instagram, we have a Discord server. We now do like weekly newsletters through MailChimp. And so like keeping like to put our name out there a lot more and like make things like enticing, and people are like, oh, like, did you see that flyer? Like, oh, it's Tau Beta Pi, and like get people kind of like talking about it, kind of spamming them into like other servers where like if you join like BMES, or as Elizabeth mentioned, like ASME, kind of be like, hey, like we're doing this, your members are invited, like come and join us. And so like kind of getting that collaboration, getting people talking about your org is what has been really helpful for us.
And just building off of what everyone else said, especially on the note of social media, in the past we've gotten our posts like reposted by the College of Engineering social media. So it's not just our members who are following our social media who'll see it, but people who follow the college in general will be able to see it, and that's good publicity. And then also our tutoring sessions for underclassmen are a good way to get the name of Tau Beta Pi out there. So these are people who might be eligible in the future. So then they'll remember when they get the letter, like I attended Tau Beta Pi tutoring sessions.
Awesome. And you bring, so both of you bring up a good topic of discussion as well, in terms of how do you communicate with your members and how do you motivate them to attend events, given the stress of everything going on right now? Obviously, that can be challenging, I imagine. So, let's start off with maybe Elizabeth, if you want to talk about how you reach out and communicate with your members and how you motivate them to come to events.
Yeah, so we've in the past, reaching out to members has mostly been through emails sent by individual officers' emails, as well as our general body meetings. Due to everything being online, we obviously I think the biggest difference is that because we don't have a lounge, that is something that we're lucky to have. We have a dedicated space engineering building that only members have access to, where you have calendars posted and you can talk to officers that often hang out in there. Because that is not something that's available, we've tried to switch over to having a virtual lounge through Discord. And that not only allows people to get out, communicate and socialize, but also allows people to get out their messages of when a meeting is going to be and what the Zoom link is going to be, and then makes it very easy for members to go to one place and find, how to get into that virtual event. They don't have to go searching through an email they got 3 weeks ago to find the link.
And do either of the rest of you want to talk a little bit about how you reach out and how you motivate your members?
Yeah, I would say we've implemented a lot of the same methods. We started a Discord server. Weekly emails are usually where the bulk of our information goes out, and I always find those very helpful. And if there's anything that you forget about, there's always our website that we link pretty much in every communication that has everything you need to know all in one place with all the links and everything. And I think just in terms of people staying motivated to come to events, we kind of just want to emphasize that we know a lot is going on. And so, some of our social events are very low pressure, like a movie night, game night, things like that, kind of meant to help relieve some stress and interact with some people that you may not be able to get social time while you're maybe quarantining and doing classes online and things like that.
Yeah, kind of building off of that, like how to motivate students. Something that my org did previously. So the previous board required that any person in Tau Beta Pi who was like an active member would have to attend, I think it was around half of all the events planned. So you'd have to attend a certain number of events. So we kind of relaxed that a little bit. So now instead of having it, oh, you have to attend 50%, you just have to show up to 2 events. So we're kind of keeping the same, like you have to attend certain events, or like you have to attend a certain amount of events, but the motivation behind that is you become active. And so with active status, you're eligible to buy graduation regalia. So we can't buy our regalia through like the Tau Beta Pi website. The board has to buy it and then give it to the members that way. So like kind of like encouraging them that way to attend our events is what we've been doing.
And I don't know if this is really, it's like tangentially related to motivation, but I think it's really important to have strong communication about when events are happening. I've gotten, for example, for different clubs here in grad school, they'll say like they'll host an event on Friday, but they don't give the link and they don't say when it's happening. So regardless of whether or not members are motivated, they need that strong communication of knowing, having all the information they need to attend an event.
For sure. Let's move on to the topic of events themselves then. And I'm going to borrow from Mena's question in the chat and change it slightly, but what has been like some of the, maybe 1 or 2 of the most successful events you've had since switching to online? And in particular, if you have an event or some kind of activity that you think would work well for smaller chapters, could you suggest that perhaps? And since the topic of smaller chapters is there, I'll start with Kim, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. So one activity that was like really successful that we did this previous spring quarter was a Bob Ross paint night. So just something that was chill, relaxing. People can hop on the Discord. We streamed the Bob Ross videos on the Discord. We have a voice chat going on so you can talk to members and be like, oh my gosh, I'm terrible at painting, or like whatever you want to tell one another. And then we also had like the chat feature so we can like put pictures of like our paintings into the chat and get other people who are on the server like, oh, like that's a cool painting, wait, there's a social, and they can hop onto the Discord as well. So that was kind of what we did. That was really successful, that I would recommend to all of you.
And speaking of not necessarily just social events, our wonderful community service chairs this semester have actually come up with a ton of really cool activities that we've been able to do. And one of them was a transcribe-a-thon, which I'd love for Amelia to talk more about because I heard it was very successful.
Yeah, so we had a transcribathon where we're basically partnering with the Smithsonian to transcribe old historical documents. We had our first transcribathon, I think last Sunday, and it was really fun. I think a lot of people enjoyed it. We had pretty good attendance. And yeah, we used that as a community service event. And we basically went out into breakout rooms and we were sharing what we found difficult to transcribe because there were a lot of like cursive, there was a lot of weird cursive stuff that we were just sharing with each other. So it was a really fun and interactive community service event. That was, yeah, you know, a little bit of both.
And to go off that, I would say our chapter as well came up with a lot of really creative community service ideas. And in terms of like a smaller chapter, these were more individual activities that you could do. For example, the Feeding America COVID-19 Response Fund, if you made a donation, we would count it as a certain number of volunteer hours, things like that. If you donated food to a local soup kitchen, again, we would count volunteer hours. So if you have a smaller chapter, some of those things are a little bit easier to do because members, you don't have to necessarily plan a big activity. You can allow members to kind of do these things on their own time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you for the question, Mena. Is there any like specific thing that you think helps make an event successful? Like any common aspect that you've seen about what separates good events from great events, or even like events that kind of fall off? Any tips like that? And any of you can start with that if you'd like.
I personally feel that something that's very important is I feel there's almost like a certain saturation number of members that need to attend an event for it to be successful. Last semester, I was in the spring, when I wasn't the president yet, I was the social chair. And at the start of the semester, the events were very poorly attended. But I found that once I could convince like 5 or 10 people to go, all of a sudden they would bring out their friends, or other people would hear that it's, you know, there's a bunch of people going to be there, and they would come out more. So like my last event that I was able to hold before the pandemic started had about 20 people in it, which I was very happy about. And one thing that I really recommend is really, really encouraging and I don't want to say forcing, but forcefully encouraging, if necessary, your other officers and chair positions to attend those events. It's not necessarily that, you know, you have to set an extra requirement that if you're an officer, you need to attend double the number of events, but because they are that extra level of leadership, it is important that they come out, and therefore they can convince their friends that are in the organization to, you know, additionally come out. And also the fact that, you know, if an initiate is at an event and sees that like, oh, the social events are well attended, there's 10 people here, you know, they're more likely to come back than if it was a first event with like 3 people and got really awkward.
I would say, I don't know how it really pertains now, but in pre-COVID times, I found that our social events that we did like every semester were very successful because people, for example, we had a donuts and coffee event, which we had every semester, so people knew what to expect. They knew a lot of people would be there. So it's difficult now because we don't have that history of like COVID events now. But if you can think of things maybe that you did before that can be directly online now. Yeah, I'm not really sure how to apply that in now, but trying to come up with history of events that people know will be good.
Kim or Savannah, do you have any advice?
Yeah, I would just echo what's been said. Officer participation seems to really help get people involved, and as well as just increase numbers, which is always great, makes events more successful. And yeah, consistency of just communication, and in some of the events that we held, you know, every semester was really, I think, helpful for members to know what to expect.
Yeah, and like everyone else said, kind of echoing as well. Getting people to know like when your event is happening, what the details are, like kind of communicating what's happening definitely is going to help getting your officers to forcefully attend your events a little bit, maybe, quote unquote. And then as Annie described, like having some sort of history, right? So like something that we are trying to do is kind of have like a lecture series or what we call Tao Talks. And when we're trying to invite alumni to speak about some sort of relevant topic. So like our first Tao Talk will be on this Wednesday, actually, about like the pandemic. How do you adapt and thrive to the pandemic in the engineering like industry world? So that's going to be like our first one. And so we're trying to set new like Tao Talk series essentially and trying to make a consistent like schedule in the sense that people know what's happening and when it's happening.
Awesome, thank you. So like I've mentioned a couple times, be sure if you have any questions, either toss them in the chats. I'm reading both the Whova chat and the Zoom chat, so either one will work. You can also use the raise hand function, and we will allow you to turn on your audio, and then you'll be able to ask your question directly if you would like to. Let's see, we have a question from the chat from Kavya, who's asking, for those of you that set up a calendar of events at the beginning of the semester so members can look ahead and plan, how did you move that online? We've had trouble transitioning that calendar planning process to online while also getting officers to come together and brainstorm that schedule and events. Who would like to take that question first?
I guess something that I would say has been slightly successful for our chapter in the past and even now is not necessarily planning out the whole semester at once. For example, initiation has certain dates that are set at the beginning of the semester and they're not going to change. Obviously initiation, but our chapter also has a bunch of other different initiation events that all initiates are expected to attend that are all set forth at the beginning. However, a lot of the additional officers will plan things as the semester goes on, especially like a social event or professional events. It's going to depend on, if we find a way to plan something new with a different organization or if a new opportunity comes up. I would generally recommend, it obviously depends on the event, but giving people about 1 to 2 weeks worth of notice. If you do that, that's all that's really necessary. If you give them more than that, they're probably not even going to try to look at the calendar and figure out if they're available then. I mean, think about, what are you doing on November 20th? I don't know. I don't think many people do know. One thing that we do that's really helpful is that we have a shared calendar that all of the officers and chairs will put the events that they're planning in. So it's very easy immediately to see, when other events are going on and when you have to schedule it around. Sometimes it works out. Last semester, I planned a social event that occurred right after a community event, so everyone could go from one to the other, and it helped with attendance. I would also say, sorry, I lost my train of thought, that something that we've been trying to do, because everything is virtual, is during our weekly officer meetings, that's when we try to come up with an idea, brainstorm for different events, and they can come from different places. Like, for example, our initiation chairs have been looking at what's been successful among the initiates and then have been encouraging those type of activities among just the general body as a whole, which has been helpful. I'll let someone else talk.
Like Elizabeth was saying with their chapter, we don't plan things out a whole semester ahead. I would highly suggest what I tried to do was planning out our speakers as far in advance as I could. We have speakers at our general body meetings, kind of similar to what Kimberly seemed to be talking about with their Tao Talks, except it was at our general body meetings. So giving those speakers a lot of decision to choose when they're going to present is helpful. It also reduces your stress because then you know that you have speakers set up for the semester and it's not 2 days before and you don't know what you're doing at your meeting. And yeah, I lost my train of thought as well. Yeah.
Yeah, along with what Annie said, we have a officer who's specifically like our webmaster who handles our website and our socials. So that I have really appreciated, especially this semester and kind of last semester with everything being online. If you need updates to the calendar, have events that you can put on there. It's kind of helpful to have one person that you can go to be like, hey, can you update this on the website for me? And that can usually happen pretty quickly. So it can evolve, you know, from week to week. More things can be added, or if things get pushed around, it's kind of an easy way to move things around.
Yeah, and I don't really have much else other than what everyone already said. They kind of cover all the bases. So it gets to me and I'm like, well, I have nothing else to add. But I think the only thing I could add is like other people mentioned, trying to have like those officer meetings like every week and like meet together with your officers. And I don't know if it's common at other organizations or like other universities, but I know for ours, we're able to request like a Zoom Pro account so we can have like unlimited members like access the Zoom meeting and whatnot. So if you don't have one of those accounts, I would recommend you get one because you can have unlimited or up to 300 guests for unlimited minutes. So that's another thing to add to that as well.
Just a quick follow-up for Elizabeth and possibly the rest of you, but how do you work out like the interactions between the officers? Like you basically have like a Google Calendar that they all add to, and you just give them reminders every week to, you know, if they need an event moved or something to do it on there, or like what's the logistics behind that?
Yeah, so it's a shared Google Calendar that everyone has access to. And so, for example, if I was to go into it right now, I could see all the events that initiation has put in, as well as all the events that community service has put in, as well as like the GBMs that I've put in. And so if, let's say, our, you know, community service team is like, oh, let's, you know, plan this new event. I think Sunday would be a good time. They go on the calendar and they see, oh, initiation already has an event on that Sunday at that time. Let's move it to a different day. And that has generally made it pretty easy. I think sometimes during the meetings when people talk about the events they're planning, things can come up. Like, for example, I mentioned, you know, doing a social event after a community service event. That's something that's more in the officer meetings discussing, hey, you know, I'm planning to have this event on this day, and me being like, oh, well, I wanted to do an event around that time. Let's like make it a joint thing. So it's more like making sure you don't double schedule just through a Google Calendar that's always available, and then, you know, opportunities for combining events or for collaboration through the officer meetings.
And just to quickly build off of that, ours is similar to Elizabeth, but we have in Google Calendars, you can share the calendar with different sets of people. So we had an officer calendar just for the officers for like our officer meetings or any other activities like that. And then there was a general calendar, which shows up on our website. You can set it up so that it'll show the calendar, and as long as you just update on the Google Calendar, updates it on the website. So that's helpful as well.
Yeah, that is exactly what we do. We have like the calendar, but we can have it linked to our website. So whenever we update something in the calendar, it automatically updates the website. So that's been like a lifesaver.
Awesome, thank you. And I hope that answers your question, Kavya. And if not, always feel free to toss in a follow-up question. We'll get to it. So we have another question from Alex Cross, who is asking about your process of managing project reports. So for those not aware or not familiar, there are project reports that you're supposed to fill out for Tabutai headquarters. Each report goes over a different project you did. So a project could be a specific event or a sustained project, like something you did over the course of the semester. But you're supposed to fill out these reports so that you tell headquarters what you're up to, and they go towards several different things, but one of the big ones is they are the determining factor behind getting a project award, a chapter project award. If you get, I believe it's 3 chapter project awards in a row, 3 years in a row, then you are given $500, I believe. And Alex, I think you can actually correct me, but a $500 scholarship that you can give to one of your members. So very worth getting. But yeah, if any of you could speak to your process behind managing project reports in your chapter.
I'll take this one first. So we have officers dedicated to, we have like a social chair and a project chair or volunteer chair, basically. So we have a system where every officer, if you're in charge of that event, you're in charge of writing the project report for that event. So the project report ends up being like a cover page and then all the projects you've done throughout the year. So it's helpful, first of all, I guess, to have a Google Drive or whatever system you want, but we have a Google Drive with all the officers, and that is like very key in a lot of successful aspects of a chapter, I think, in organization, but for project reports as well. So you have a template up on there that everyone can use so that all of your project pages look the same. And then I mean, you can't be too strict on this, but there's generally, I told officers to give them 2 weeks after the event happened to write the project report. So then it's not May and you have to write a project report from September and you don't know what happened at this event. So generally I gave them 2 weeks to write the project report after it was due, and they put it in a folder on the Google Drive. And then in May, it was super easy to go in and just take all of what everyone had done and compile it into one document.
Yeah, and another thing, sorry, Annie, I'm just gonna echo off you. I think we've made it really clear when we're handing down from different officers from the one year to the next who they may need to communicate with to do some of the reports. I know we've had kind of our initial report due this year, and we don't have our eligibility lists yet, so that was kind of frustrating, but we've been really clear in our communication where we are at in the process. And our officers know which other officers they need to talk to, who's in charge of kind of an aspect if they need to include it in the report.
I also want to add in, our chapter has within the past year switched to the online reporting, just to make things easier for all of the officers. But basically, it's just expected that all the different officers are completing reports for the events that they are running and holding. And then our secretary goes in and confirms and sends them off. I think definitely something to stress with the online reporting is that if you are the leader of your chapter or just any officer in general, is to make sure that people are actually doing it. Last year, I joined the executive board at a weird time, just because someone else left a position. And about halfway through the semester, I was at a meeting and I was talking to the president. I was like, so, how do we do those reports things? And he looked at me like, you haven't been doing those. So make sure you make it very clear to officers, this is what the system is, this is how we do it, and this is when we expect you to get things done.
Yeah, and so actually, funny story, I don't think our previous board knew about project reports. So we didn't know anything going in until like this year. Like the previous president was like, oh wait, there's an online reporting system. And we're like, okay, so we're all kind of new to this and like online reporting and whatnot, but we are having our secretary kind of manage like the actual reporting side of it, and he knows like exactly who to talk to. So like Annie mentioned, we have like an outreach chair or a social chair, we have an initiation chair, so knowing like who to contact to fill out those reports.
I also forgot to add something that makes it easier for us in terms of figuring out what events people have gone to for tracking active membership is because the secretary goes in and confirms all the reports. That is when they are able to check people off for doing events and make sure they get the points that they need. So that also helps with just general bookkeeping.
So if you're not familiar with the online system, I'm actually adding into the chat a link to a video that I believe was made by Alex that goes over how to use the online system. Hopefully I have that link right. But I'm going to echo a couple things from the panelists. Make sure that you're getting them done soon enough, because it becomes really difficult to remember how you ran an event months after you ran it. And it's also important that you are as thorough as possible when you write out these reports so that you have the best chance that you can have to get that scholarship money, get that project award down the line. Something that I know has happened is that one year's group of officers will not care too much about the project reports, won't get them in on time, or like kind of does a sloppy job with them, and then they miss out on the chapter project award. And because it takes 3 years in a row to get that scholarship money, they miss out on it. So just letting you know, make sure to check that out. And yeah, make sure that you're filling those project reports out as you complete the events or whatever projects you're working on within your chapter. We have another question, let me find it. How do you advertise to freshmen and sophomores that they are aware of Tau Beta Pi? I think we've already mentioned showing up to club fairs. We've mentioned tutoring for freshmen. Is there anything else that any of you have done that helps specifically target freshmen and sophomores?
We normally have like this thing called like Tau Beta Pi Week, where the week leading up to initiation, we'll have like giveaway free, or not free, but like $1 or $2 slices of pie in one of the engineering buildings, or do like some sort of game in a different building where you can win a prize. But that's obviously not something that's available to us during the virtual semester.
Okay, unless any of you had another quick suggestion.
I can just jump in and say, emphasize with your engineering department kind of heads about Tau Beta Pi, and if there's any events that they want to kind of plug Tau Beta Pi to the engineering body as a whole, I think that's really helpful. Our Dean of Engineering kind of talked about Tau Beta Pi at Honors Convocation, which was really helpful, really awesome. Just emphasize, we honor those people who are members, and this is something we really want to see grow even more on our campus. So getting kind of those head people in charge is really helpful.
I think I'll just add on to that really quickly and just say, I know a lot of chapters will run specific professional development events that are geared towards freshmen and sophomores, and that can really help. And if you do something like that, you can reach out to the like engineering 101, or it might be a specific like chemical engineering 101 course or whatever. And often the professors are willing to give extra credit for people who attend, and that really helps attendance as well. So we have another question from Kavya, which is, how did you all handle officer transitions this semester? Since we moved from officers who did half in-person, half online events to officers that will do all online, how did you pass along words of wisdom, tips, and traditions?
I guess I could start with that one. What the previous board did for us, at least, is that we had basically a transition document. So they kind of typed up like a mini manual of like, okay, how to be X position in Tau Beta Pi. So that was really helpful. So they gave us that transition document, and then they met one-on-one with us at some point just to like kind of give us like a rundown of everything. And we could ask questions and kind of have like an open forum essentially with that officer. So that was what was really helpful for us, at least.
We basically did it the exact same way Kimberly did. So just to add to that, I'm going to reiterate that the Google Drive is really helpful in this respect. So you can have all those the officer description transition documents in the Google Drive. Everyone has access to them, and then also less COVID related, but chapter related, you can see like the history of what's gone on before. So maybe last year your chapter had a really weak officer board or something, it just wasn't good, but then you can look at what happened the year before and how they did things then. So it really helps to help it, like making sure that you are recording kind of everything you're doing. So we also wrote some documents, and we hosted Order the Engineer online. So we made a document on how to do that online. So then this year, the officers should have an easy way of knowing how to do it online. So especially now that we're all making these new procedures for online, recording that for next year's officers and going forward is going to be really helpful for the future.
Yeah, something I'd like to add on is, in addition to having, documents, like I know we have somewhere in the past, executive board written very, very detailed manuals for how to run their positions. But we also, when we have elections, we try to have them a little like mid-spring, a little after mid-spring semester, so that there is a transition period where the old board is still there. They're still, helping run things, but the new board is learning from them and getting that experience. And something that we at least did my year when I transitioned into this role is that I met with the president multiple times over Zoom to talk about the different things that I needed to know. And the reason why we did multiple times is because it's a lot of information. If he just talked to me for 2 hours, I would have forgotten most of it. Because we split it up, it was actually a lot easier to remember everything. And I asked that all of the other officers reached out to the person who was in their role previously to learn from them as well.
Cool. I think I'll just mention really quick, sorry, and then I'll let Kim go, but on the subject of officer transition meetings, now that they're pretty much all going to take place online, it's pretty easy to record them, right? So like, even if you're not making a document or something, you can just record the video, save it to YouTube or something like that, and then you have it for reference. Because, well, like I've seen some officer transition meetings that last 2 hours, and there's no way anyone remembers anything from that. But if you can go back to the video, I think that would help a lot. So maybe it's one way to take advantage of the current like Zoom situation, basically. But sorry to jump in front of you, Kim.
No worries. I was just gonna chime on Elizabeth's point. We had like that transition period in our spring quarter, and so toward I think mid-spring we started attending those like officer meetings. So like we knew officers were kind of just watching and just saw how they ran business. And I thought that was also really helpful just to kind of see like what officer meetings should look like, how to stay on track, how to be effective, how to communicate, things like that.
Thank you very much for that response. And thank you everyone so far for the questions. If you have any more questions, again, feel free to toss them in the chat or use the raise hand function, and that way we can get you in here and you can ask your question in person. So thank you very much so far for those questions. Let's see, what haven't we touched on so far? I think we haven't covered entirely how you interact with your officers. I think we've mentioned a few things, like I think Kim, you do weekly officer meetings. Do any of you have any tips in terms of how you communicate with your officers, how often you're in touch, things like that?
Yeah, so I will say that the way we do it is that we have weekly officer meetings, but every other week is meant, the only people who are required to go is the executive board, which is president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. Anyone else can come in if they have things they want to talk about, especially if they have updates, want new events. But that way, people like the webmaster or our social chair, if they don't have any new updates, have more time. And, I still get the chance to talk to them, every other week. Something that I would really recommend that I did this summer, it was, I think, a little more helpful because everything was virtual and we were trying to figure out how to transition. But I met with every new officer individually to talk to them about, how comfortable they were with the position, what their plans were for the semester, if there were previous events, how they plan to transition them. The vice president was also in those meetings when available. And for example, initiation, it was a very long meeting figuring out how are we going to move all the different events we have. But in other cases, it was, the treasurer actually had held the position the previous year. And so it was more of him talking to me about, what does the budget look like financially? What do we need to worry about? And it was a shorter meeting. And that made it really easy that when we first had our first board meeting at the beginning, I knew what where everyone was in their process. I was aware of what was going on, but no one had to sit through 2 hours of listening to initiation and community service, figure out how to go online, and in order to just talk for 15 minutes about how nothing is changing for their role. So.
Yeah, we primarily use GroupMe. We have meetings every other week with our entire officer kind of board. And I found that helpful. We just have multiple ways, we have a Discord, a sub part of our main Discord that's just for officers and it's locked. So there's just multiple avenues that anybody can jump in and ask a question or, find out who they need to be communicating with. I think that's helpful, like GroupMe over text, because at least for me, I have a lot of my school and club related kind of text in GroupMe. So kind of keeping that transitions separate helps me not lose different messages and things like that.
I guess I'll add on to what everyone else has said. Like Savannah was saying, we have our officer meetings every other week. And because that is a little less frequent than like every week, it's important, I found, especially if you're the president, to make sure you're really prepared for that meeting. You don't want things to slip through the cracks because then you're not getting to it for another 2 weeks. So I always made an agenda ahead of time. Or maybe if you want, it might be more efficient to have the officers themselves just put what they want to talk about. But really being prepared for that meeting. And then if something does slip through or you don't want to wait until the meeting, or if it's something small, like not being afraid to just like text the officer. Or last semester, I even found myself like calling officers more because you can't just run into them or catch them after an event or something. I know calling for me is like one of my greatest fears, but like hopefully you're okay with your officers and it's okay to talk to them on the phone or on Zoom. But yeah, just not being afraid to put in the extra effort to communicate now, because I think it's harder to communicate now. So making sure you're really on top of that.
Yeah, and just to echo what, again, everyone else has been saying, we have like meeting minutes or like that agenda so we can fill out before the meeting, like what we're going to talk about and kind of have an outline of things. And then our secretary can kind of fill in the details as we talk during the meeting. And then in terms of like communication avenues, having those multiple methods of communication. So we have the Discord, we have email. And then if I send out an email saying, okay, here's the Zoom link, here's the meeting time, whatnot, I can send a quick text, be like, hey, like just send out like the Zoom information, just make sure you check your email kind of thing. It's kind of like checking up on multiple avenues helps keep people on task.
And one last thing to add kind of off of what Kim was saying is that sometimes I found that certain officers just could not like use the GroupMe properly, or, you know, they just like, some officers just have a really hard time with certain modes of communication. So if you figure that out for certain officers, it's helpful to adapt what you're doing to properly communicate with them. Hopefully they are in the same boat as everyone else, but sometimes that's not the case.
Very true. I am curious about what has sort of gone wrong this year, or perhaps a better way of saying it. What's something that you've had to learn the hard way? You know, some kind of lesson, something that you wish you had done differently, or if you were to do it again, you would do it differently. Do you have anything like that? And any of you can start with that.
I guess I want to give the opportunity for my community service chair and my initiation chair to speak up on this. They've been more down and dirty in the details of planning events and running them, so they could probably talk about it.
I think the main thing that we've run into for community service would just be that like it's hard to get people to sign up, especially if you're not physically there reminding them. And usually we have a lounge where like, you know, you can just pester people just to like sign up for things and to come to events, but you can't really do that on an online space. So you just got to keep sending messages on Discord. So I guess that would be a difficulty that we've encountered. But I think with the events that we've had and the turnout that we've had, it still ended up being okay, just because we kind of anticipated there like certain turnouts for certain events and made sure that it would be okay, and it wouldn't be too awkward if there weren't as many people signing up for a certain event. But it's still just been an issue that we've just kept going after, and we just keep sending messages in the Discord to kind of get rid of that problem. But yeah.
So my name is Justin, and I'm one of the initiation co-chairs for the Maryland Beta chapter. One thing that we anticipated and sort of addressed before this semester was like that engagement with initiates, because we've discussed this already, but it is difficult, especially in this online setting, to effectively engage with potential members. So one thing that we've sort of done to address this is create a virtual space, like Elizabeth said, in our Discord server, but also having more personalized one-on-one interviews with both current members and initiates. And based on the feedback that we've received, I think that's both helped initiates connect with other current members of the society, but also get to know those people that are alongside them during the initiation process.
One thing that's been a challenge for us this year is, I think I mentioned before, we haven't been able to get an eligibility list because our department decided to redo the back end of their computer systems. So that's been really frustrating. And I mean, we reached out probably 3 weeks before the semester even started. And, you know, here we are, we're halfway through and don't have anything. So we've kind of had to come to the fact that we probably won't be able to have any initiates this semester because it's just too kind of short for them to be able to finish all their requirements and things. So kind of recognizing, you know, what are the limits of the things that you can control. Like we did all that we could do. We reached out as soon as we could. And we've been in contact with the right people. It's just been a long process. So then kind of taking lessons learned and just seeing how we can move forward. Can we get a jump on, you know, the next semester's list? Can we make this process easier in the future so other semesters aren't running into this problem that we have? But yeah, just kind of recognizing that things are difficult for a lot of different groups right now. So there are going to be challenges that you run into that you necessarily can't foresee or plan for. And then it's about how you kind of react and adjust.
Yeah, and I think something else to kind of tie onto that is kind of knowing that even if you have a plan, it's probably not going to work. Just acknowledging that, like, no matter how much you plan, there could be things that come up. And so, like, even if you pour your heart and soul into an event that you've been planning, people still might not attend, right? And so something that we kind of like recognize is that, okay, maybe people can't always like attend events, or maybe that time just doesn't work. And so having like alternate methods of like make up attendance, or like a Google sheet, or like a sign-in form that they can fill out on their own time, but still get some feedback, right? So like, oh, like what are some events you want to see in the future? Oh, like what times would work for you in the future? Kind of still getting that engagement and that feedback, but allowing them to do it on their own time, just in case like they can't make your event.
Annie, did you have anything real quick?
I don't think I really have anything to add.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to check. Ian, can you bring in Kavya to ask a question? And Kavya, I think you can unmute and ask now.
Hi guys. Okay, so I had a quick question. It's actually in a sort of follow-up to what Alan asked earlier about officer communication. So one problem, or I guess one struggle that we've been having in the past and currently, is that officers oftentimes don't reply to messages, or they don't, it's like communication in general has just been difficult. Like we have a group me for officers, we have a Discord, right? And we'll put something and we'll be like, oh, like tell us if somebody can come to this thing and help out. And crickets, silence, there's nothing. And but if you ask that same question individually to somebody, they will answer within like 3 seconds. And so that's the, like, how do you help officers feel comfortable communicating in like a group setting and like communicating in general, even if that means like when you ask them a question and they don't know the answer, like getting them to say, I don't know, because that's equally important, so that you know what's going on. So how do you do that? How do you make sure that people are always talking?
Yeah, and I actually have a good answer to that one, though I don't know if you'll like it that much. Basically, when we have our officer meetings, if I can kind of sense that people are like, there's struggles going on, but they don't want to tell anyone, or they don't want to like talk about it, I host like a mini officer social. So like right after the officer meeting, we'll play like, I don't know, like Scribble.io or like Among Us, or like some game that we'll all play just to get people like talking and like familiarize themselves with each other. Because I feel like if your officers are friendly with one another, then they become a little more comfortable about talking about issues and whatnot. So I would recommend have some little like officer bonding time, and then with that kind of encourage like more conversation through that afterwards.
I would say exactly what Kim said. And then also as well, sometimes if there were crickets in the officer chat, I would have one officer who was a good friend, and I'd text her and be like, hey, you need to respond. Because as soon as one person responds, then everyone else is like, oh, okay, it's okay to respond. Like, I won't, it'll be okay. So having like one or two people you can message and tell them like, respond, please.
Your VP is your best friend on that matter, actually.
Yeah, and what Annie said, that's definitely a big part of some of the group chats is if someone doesn't respond first, then nobody responds. So just having someone you can count on to be like, hey, put something out there so people start seeing it and responding is helpful.
I think also something that might help increase like communication in an officer chat is just having some social talk just in your chat. It doesn't have to be all business. Make sure not to go too far with this. Last year, the officers chat that I was in was a lot more active than just the general members chat, which is never good. But, you know, I try to like post it or, you know, message just fun, exciting things that I see. Just be a little social with my other officers, because then it feels less like just a responsibility and more like, oh, this is the thing that I enjoy doing. It's a responsibility that I like that I'm, you know, have that responsibility.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for the question and thanks for the responses. Those were really good. So we're coming up on the end of the hour, so I want to give a few quick announcements. First, if you can, please rate this session. If you go on the Whova app for this event, if you scroll down a little bit, there should be a button that says rate session. And if you can leave us some feedback so that if we ever have to do Onvention again, we know, we get some lessons learned from that. Also, please make sure to thank the panelists. So you can just toss a nice thank you in the chat so that they can see it. I really appreciate them taking the time to come out here and answer all your questions. And then the third and final announcement for right now is simply make sure to sign up for the ICE workshop sessions next week, Wednesday and Thursday. There's 6 different sessions, so I'm sure you'll be able to find a time that works for you. And it's a really good experience to be able to interact directly with officers from other chapters and brainstorm new ideas for your chapter that will hopefully help you not just survive, but also thrive, hopefully. For the panelists, do any of you have any parting thoughts or things that we didn't get to that you think are important? Nope.
Something that just passing thought, something that I've actually been struggling with like right now, just for a little background, I'm actually in isolation, is there'll be times if you're leading your chapter that you just are having a bad time, like mentally, you're stressed out, and that's okay. You don't have to put this burden on yourself that like, oh, I'm doing bad, so the chapter's doing bad. But keep in mind that, you have these other officers that are there to help you out. My VP has really stepped up in the past week to help me while I'm dealing with everything that's going on in my personal life. And so our chapter is continuing to run really well because I have those people to rely on. Just remember that you do also have those people that you can rely on.
Awesome. Anyone else have any closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts would be just to not give up. If you feel like your chapter is really struggling, going online, like maybe you were struggling before COVID and now like, what are you supposed to do? Just like keep trying. Hopefully you got a lot of ideas from this session and going through the rest of Onvention, and especially going to the ICE sessions next week. If it seems like members aren't engaged or motivated, that's not necessarily always the case. It might just be the way in which you're communicating with them or different little details that aren't indicative of their overall attitude towards Tau Beta Pi in the organization. So just keep trying and learn a lot from Onvention.
For sure. Well, we've come to the end of the hour. So again, thank you very much. Make sure to thank the panelists, and hopefully we'll see you next week for the ICE workshop sessions. But in the meantime, take care and have a good rest of your week.